Hey there, military veterans. This is Justin from BeyondTheUniform.io, where my goal is to give you the tools you need to be successful in your civilian career. My guest today is Jay Mangone.
Because we were in Haiti, our wash-down was in Guantanamo Bay, so I actually did my first phone interview from a call center in Guantanamo Bay on my way back from Haiti, which led to an in-person interview like the third day I was back in New York. Which then led to me starting a month or two later.
That's quite the
the
crazy road.
It's like, crazy road and like super smooth transition, and like part of that was creating my own luck, but a huge part of it was just straight up dumb luck for sure.
There's a lot of reasons why I found this interview compelling. First of all, Jay went and worked at a think tank when he got out of the military. And if you're like me, when you hear think tank, you picture that scene from South Park where manatees are working to build Family Guy episodes. He talks about what it's like to work in a think tank. He got his master's in international relations at Yale. That's a first for the show, and speaking about that. He talks about how General McChrystal got him his first job out of grad school, and he now works at the New York Department of Veteran Services, so he has a really good perspective on tools to help veterans succeed in their transition. So here is my interview with Jay. All right, Jay. Well, thank you for joining me on Beyond the Uniform and taking the time to speak with me.
Thanks for having me, Justin.
So for our listeners, I wanted to give a quick background on you, and please correct me if I mess anything up here, but Jay works at the New York City Department of Veteran Services, where he serves as their Director of Public-Private Partnerships and Development. He started out studying political science at Boston University and then served as a Platoon Commander in the Marines. After leaving the military, he was a research associate at the think tank the Council on Foreign Relations for a year, prior to going to Yale for his master's in international relations. After that, he joined the Aspen Institute and was their director of the Franklin Project, which is an initiative to start a national discussion around a year of service for all citizens. And I believe he actually started in on that role by serving as a teacher's assistant for General McChrystal while at Yale. Jay, really excited to have you here today.
Thanks so much. The only thing you messed up, it's probably the only thing I would correct, is I went to Boston College, not Boston University.
Oh, man.
A little bit of a hocky rivalry there, but otherwise you got it all right.
That's like saying I went to West Point instead of the Naval Academy. I didn't mean to do that. Apologies.
No, not that severe of a discretion. No worries, man.
Well, to kick things off, I'm always interested in learning about your decision to leave the military. At what point you knew you were going to leave the Marines, and how you approached that decision?
Yeah, so in all honesty, I probably didn't allow myself to think about it as much as in retrospect. I wish I would have, and I think that's because I was not a guy that had ever conceived of joining the military as a career. When I joined it with the notion that we're at war, and it's just the right thing to do is to do my part as a able-bodied guy. And so, my decision to leave was probably made, the day that I got to OCS. Not that I didn't enjoy my time in the Marine Corps. I enjoyed the hell out of it. But for me, I think I kind of actually, while I was serving, had the blinders on and never conceived of it as anything more than just 4 years of my life. And in retrospect, I really do wish that I had put more consideration into staying in. I don't regret my decision to get out, but it was a decision that I had made pretty early on, and frankly before I even joined the service.
And how did you think? So I'm assuming that kind of informed your decision on the reserves, because I'm always curious to learn about how people approach that decision of, do I stay on reserves or do I make the hard break from the military?
Yeah, so I made the hard break, and that was in part informed by the fact that I had a pretty good idea of what I wanted to do for a job, and had a wife, then girlfriend, waiting for me in New York City. But I will be honest with you, the reserves is a thing that has only recently crept back into my mind. I'd say there's maybe like a 10-15% chance I actually do it. But similar to the reasons that I kind of left the Marine Corps after 4 years, joining the reserves is never anything that until recently I'd put serious consideration into.
What's motivating that? Like, what's causing you at this point to think about that now?
Yeah, I mean, you just missing the guys really, and just having an opportunity to continue to serve. And it's I have a 1-year-old son now, and I think it'd be a good example for him to know that he has a parent that's serving, and so that's definitely a big piece of it, is just being a good role model to my son. And also, frankly, I started this job just about a month ago. And just it's given me occasion to go to a bunch of events, particularly because this is in New York City, and we just recently had the 15th anniversary of September 11th. So being around a lot of guys that are still in uniform, guys and girls that are still in uniform, and seeing the camaraderie that they have has definitely made me consider joining the reserves. Now, there also happens to be a reserve Marine infantry weapons company that's about 25 miles away from where I live. So logistically, there's also that makes it a little bit easier too.
Well, you're not alone on that. I've definitely heard that a lot from other people on these interviews, is missing that camaraderie and missing that just sense of belonging that comes with military. And it's just interesting to hear that about having decided not to join the reserves and now considering joining back in. It's an interesting perspective. And I'm curious, when you first made that transition to civilian life, what was the most surprising about that? Was there anything that you had maybe a misconception about what life would be like, and it was a different way, or anything you hadn't thought of that kind of snuck up on you in that transition?
Yeah, so I'll probably the most important moment in my transition was one of the tougher parts about having a job at the Council on Foreign Relations is, and I literally, my last deployment was to Haiti. I extended to go there. I got back from Haiti, I think, on like April 4th or something like that. And on, I think, April 6th or April 7th, I was in my car driving to New York City. So my get back from deployment, turn around and get out of the Marine Corps was really, really quick. I think, for probably the first 4 or 5 months at CFR, I kind of had a little bit of an edge and an attitude, thinking that, I'm a 24-year-old who has a better grip on reality than these people that are around me. And you're at the corner of 68th Street and Park Avenue in Manhattan. There's not a further cry from what life in Jacksonville, North Carolina, or Haiti or Iraq is like. And then one day, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 months into my tenure there, I worked for 4 colonels, one from each branch of service, and the Army fellow, the Army colonel, pulled me into his office, and he just said, "Jay, here's the thing. You made a decision to be here. Make the best of it, period." And from that point on, despite the fact that, of course, I was still uncomfortable a little bit, just having actually a active duty military guy tell me to pick my head up and just kind of do my duty, and having someone else to tell me that, just I could say Roger too, really just kind of opened my eyes.
That's great. And for someone on active duty who might not be familiar with the Council on Foreign Relations, how would you explain who they are and what your work was like while you were with them?
Yeah, so explaining a think tank, that's a really hard thing to do, and but the gist of it is, they have 2 sides, one of which is what they call the studies side. So it's a bunch of smart people that get paid to inform the country's foreign policy conversation. And then on the other side, they publish a journal called Foreign Affairs. My particular job, so one thing that CFR does is they do a military fellowship. So when I was there, it was just Navy, Air Force, Army, Marine Corps. Subsequently, they've added the Coast Guard as well. It's an 06 from each branch of service. And they spend a year. It's partially an opportunity to spend time with their families. It's partially an opportunity to think with a different level of strategic depth and to be informed by outside civilian opinions that they might not get if they were, say, doing a tour in the Pentagon. And then third, it's an opportunity for rising up-and-comers in the military to develop relationships with important people in New York City, which is a place where, frankly, until recently, I don't think that there was much of a connection between certainly the active duty community and the broader New York City community.
That's great. And how did you find your way there? Like, I'm wondering, when you were on active duty, were you looking at multiple different things, or did you know this is where you wanted to go? What was that process like of finding this first role outside of the Marines?
Yeah, so because I knew that I would be moving back to New York City when I was on pre-deployment leave, maybe about a year before I got out, I just started meeting people for coffee, meeting people for a beer. And I mean, one, piece of advice, like, I just sent a bunch of interesting people cold emails and just explained them, hey, I'm a Marine. I'm going to be moving to New York City in a year. Not 100% sure what I want to do, but would you be willing to grab a cup of coffee with me? My response rate on cold emails was probably like 60 or 70%. And honestly, through one of those conversations, I maintained a relationship with a guy who, when the research associate for the Military Fellows Program position came up at CFR, he forwarded me the listing and said, hey, is this something you'd be interested in? I said, yeah. He happened to know the hiring manager. And I actually did my first phone interview while we were doing when you come back from a deployment, you have to wash all your gear down and get it inspected by the Department of Agriculture. Because we were in Haiti, our wash down was in Guantanamo Bay. So I actually did my first phone interview from a call center in Guantanamo Bay on my way back from Haiti, which led to an in-person interview like the third day I was back in New York, which then led to me starting a month or two later.
That's quite the
the
crazy road.
It's like, crazy road and like super smooth transition, and like part of that was creating my own luck, but a huge part of it was just straight up dumb luck for sure.
And did you know at that point, that you wanted to go on to get a master's degree, and this was viewed as kind of a stepping stone to that? Or did this inform your decision of like, hey, I like this and I need a master's degree to be able to move up the ranks? Or how did master's or higher education play into this?
So part of it was that the job at CFR was really, really busy, but only for a couple of kind of 4-week spurts during the year. And beyond that, frankly, I had a bunch of downtime where I was kind of able to do, to kind of create my own day. And part of that meant that like I had time to study for my GRE. If I'd work 9 to 5, like I could sit at my desk and study for my GRE from, 5 to 6:30 or 7 every night. So part of it was just feeling like, man, I'm in a good place. I'm in a job where I have the flexibility where I can, study for my grad school entrance exams. I may as well take that opportunity. And then so that was part of it. The other part of it was, my philosophy going into CFR was just do as awesome of a job as I possibly can and see how long that lasts. And kind of after 6 months, it just felt like everything that I wanted to accomplish there could be achieved within a year. So I didn't really have an exact idea that I wanted to do to grad school. It was more, I started CFR, I had an opportunity to study, and over the course of the first 6 months of the job, I felt like I could accomplish everything I wanted to there within a year. And grad school just kind of felt like the next logical step.
That's great. I mean, I am a big fan of that quote of don't spend 3 years getting a year's worth of experience. And I think that's a very easy trap to fall into. And so I like that you seem to be pretty proactive in recognizing early on, like even setting out the goals of what you wanted to learn and then saying like, look, I've kind of grown as much as I can here. Now it's time to move to the next area of growth.
Yeah, no, and like, listen, there's a trade-off there, which is if you don't have a really good relationship with your supervisor, you can create ill will. But in that particular situation, I was just really, really honest with my boss. And after only 6 months on the job, I said, hey, this feels like I'm going to accomplish everything I want to in a year. I'm happy to, set up my replacement for success, but what do you think about that? Is that going to put you in a bad spot? And the answer I got was, as you would imagine, just really thankful that I was straightforward and honest and didn't leave them in the lurch. So honesty and straightforwardness definitely helped me there.
That's great. And I want to use the bulk of the time to talk about the Franklin Project and your current work, but I did want to touch just briefly on Yale and your master's in international relations. Of any thoughts about what that experience was like, or any advice to people who would like to pursue a similar path there?
Yeah, so it's Yale's a pretty particular program. So it's a relatively new program. It's under the auspices of something called the Jackson Institute, which I think that their first graduating class was in 2011 or 2012. So it's a relatively new part of Yale, and they've done something unique, which is it's a 25 or 30 person class, so it's small. And the way that the guy that runs it, his name is Jim Levinson, he's just done a great job making sure you hear 25 people and you go, man, that could really feel like a community. And that's, 25 people makes a community possible, but it doesn't ensure it. Jim has structured the school in a way that it feels like a community. And I guess I approached grad school. For me was, I feel like there was a bunch of things that I should have read when I was an undergrad, but might not have been mature enough to. So grad school for me was just a period of time to look at learning as a job, and just kind of throw myself completely into understanding what it was to think in a complex way. Don't know if I achieved that. Definitely left with a lot more questions than answers, but it was a really, having the chance when you're, in your mid to late 20s to look at studying as a job, it just gives you a different framework for learning, for me at least, than when I was an immature 18 to 21-year-old.
Man, it's I can see how the CFR, or I can imagine how CFR was a good lead-in to that of this very, a great learning environment, taking a deep dive into different subjects and having some freedom to really navigate and understand complex issues.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think you're absolutely right. One of the risks coming out of the military is that, is feeling like you should always be told what you need to learn. And CFR definitely as a lead into grad school, it definitely helped me to understand what it was to teach myself things, which I found is a really important skill.
That's great. And so after Yale, you found yourself in charge of the Franklin Project. How did that come about?
Mostly nepotism. I say that like mildly tongue in cheek. So I, when I was in grad school, I ended up being General McChrystal's TA, as you mentioned, and I just got really, really lucky. And when the Franklin Project, which was, I graduated in 2013, the Franklin Project as a notion was started in 2012 by some remarks that General McChrystal had made. By 2013, those remarks and the idea of the Franklin Project had raised enough dollars to hire a small staff. And General McChrystal just asked me to come on and be the director. So just jumped at that opportunity.
And again, for a military audience, how would you explain the Aspen Institute and the Franklin Project?
Yeah, so I'll start with the Aspen Institute. The Aspen Institute kind of has three parts. The first part is public-facing events. So kind of their most well-known of those events is something called the Aspen Ideas Festival, which is run for a couple weeks every late June and early July in Aspen, Colorado. The second piece of what they do is fellowship programs. They have a bunch of those. And then the third piece of what they do is policy programs. So they get experts in a variety of different fields, and I think there are 30-some policy programs at the Aspen Institute right now, to kind of do whatever is needed to advance whatever their cause happens to be. So our particular of Aspen's 30 or so policy programs was the Franklin Project, and it was an initiative to make a year of national service a common expectation and opportunity for every young American.
That's great. And what was your work like in terms of painting that picture of what day-to-day life was like and what your week-to-week life was like?
Yeah, I mean, when you have a vision that's as big as that, you can, it's really easy to get lost in the sauce and feel like your day-to-day actions are not advancing the cause. And it's really, really easy to kind of focus on the wrong things. Anyway, so I guess I would define my my responsibilities as prioritizing. So what's most important to do now and what can we do later? And then communicating what those priorities were in a compelling enough way to get other people to join me. That's a really diffuse answer, but that really was my job. And then the last part and the most amazing part was, I got to, over the course of a few years there, got to build a small team around the Franklin Project, which I say this without hesitation. Just 6 of the most talented people, I'll ever work with. So building the team was probably the best part of the job.
And as you mentioned, building a team, it makes me think about just something I'm always curious to learn more about, which is that difference between leadership outside of the military versus inside the military. And I'm curious, with your experience at the Franklin Project, how did that differ?
For me, not all that much. I guess I'm in the camp of a lot of people have a stereotype about the military that it's, explicit authority exists, and so higher headquarters tells you what to do, and you salute and say, "Roger, sir, ma'am," and you go for it and carry out the orders of the day. Anyone that's been in knows that one of the beautiful things of the military is that really, really complex problems get pushed down to pretty low levels. So, through the military, I learned that leadership was a lot less about being kind of the dude at the center of things and more about kind of helping to set a vision. And then, once, your team's around that vision and takes the initiative to solve problems on their level, is mostly about just removing barriers for your team. Learned that in the military, and I hope that I, lived up to that standard with the Franklin Project as well.
It's just a reminder of how much I love the Marine Corps' leadership philosophy. At the academy, all my favorite instructors were Marines, and they just had such an incredible example for me at the time of quality leadership and taking care of your people, and that just jumps out when you're speaking about your experience. It's something I appreciate about the Marine Corps.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. Semper Fidelis.
Yeah, it is. I think I didn't have as much exposure in submarines, but at the Naval Academy, a lot of the guys that went Marines, I think, got kind of it's kind of an easy joke to make about Marines and uptight and all these other things. But when it boils down to at least from my perspective, the consistency of example of leaders who knew that their leadership was completely based on the well-being of those who served underneath them. I continuously, even as a civilian, or maybe even more so as a civilian in entrepreneurship, look back on that as a foundation of my own view on leadership. So that would be another great podcast show, man, of just leadership stories from these Marines and just different people like them, because it's really powerful examples.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And, before we go on to your current role, I'm just wondering if, as you look back on those first couple of years out of the military, in what ways did you feel behind your civilian counterparts, and in what ways did you feel ahead based on your military experience?
Yeah. I guess so. Behind definitely on specific skills. So a part of one of the skills I had to build with the Franklin project was fundraising. Not something that I had any idea how to do, and I think a bad move that veterans can make sometimes is thinking that because they served, they have the right to be viewed as a leader in any field. And yeah, like you got some leadership skills, and we have some leadership skills, and we're lucky to have had an experience that gives us those leadership skills. But there are also discrete things that we need to learn to move into the civilian world. And so, for instance, I begrudgingly at first had to make a decision to understand how to fundraise and be good at it. And I'm certainly not good at it yet, but just there are skills that you will not be good at. And you just need to take the responsibility to get good at them. On the positive side, yeah, it's absolutely about leadership. But I guess I'm one of those guys that's in the camp that I don't think there's too much to distinguish between veterans and non-veterans. There's a couple areas where I've noticed a little bit of a difference when it comes to kind of leadership style. So number one is just comfort with admitting what you don't know. I've found veterans generally just more willing to admit where they have ignorance, and I think that that's part of their comfort in coping with ambiguity. Like the first step in dealing with an ambiguous, chaotic situation is an honest assessment of what you do and don't know, and I think that veterans are pretty good at making that assessment. And then the second skill, leadership skill, I think veterans have is just both the ability to describe a situation as it actually is, but kind of on the other side of that, almost like a physical reaction and like a sick feeling in the stomach when a matter is being discussed in any way other than authentically. So, I mean, anyone that's come from the service and gone into a civilian job can think of a scenario where there's an issue sitting on the middle of the table and people are just talking around it or putting, are gilding it with gold coating and talking about it as though some issue, which is actually a problem, is not one. And I think that the veterans are good at describing things as they are, I guess.
I love that. On that first point, that really resonates from the sense of, I find often I have this like strong reaction when someone is not representing something accurately, or, an extreme desire to be 100% accurate in what I'm saying about what I do or don't know. And I think a lot of that stems from this sense that gets beaten into you where incorrect information really could lead to loss of life, and wanting to always be extremely precise in what you say. And if you don't have the knowledge, being open about that so someone else from the team can fill in, or so there's that knowledge gap. And so I was laughing to myself as you said that first point, because I know like many situations where I have like very heated reaction if someone is not reciprocating that, or if I feel like I'm not able to be as upfront on knowledge gaps, because that the sense of consequence is very high, at least from my experience in the military, and it sounds like in yours as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, yes, I think you hit the nail on the head, I think. And yeah, I mean, that's it, exactly.
And I was excited to learn more about your experience at the New York City Department of Veteran Services. And I know that you've just started that recently, but I'd love to learn more about the work that you do there right now and the work that you're going to be doing.
Yeah, so so just quick background on the department. So for about 28 or 29 years, created under the administration of Mayor Koch, who's himself a veteran, New York City had a mayor's office of Veterans Affairs, and that office provided some bare bones services, but played a largely ceremonial role over time. Fast forward to November 20, the Mayor's Office of Veterans Affairs never had more than about 4 people on staff. Fast forward to November 2015, the city's advocacy community, with a lot of pressure, in partnership with the city council and the mayor, passed legislation to transition the mayor's office of Veterans Affairs into a Department of Veterans Services. That transition became official on July 1st, 2016. So on July 1st, 2016, the New York City Mayor's Office of Veterans Affairs became the New York City Department of Veterans Services. We're the first new city agency in either 15 or 23 years, depending on how you count, and we're the first large city agency solely devoted to a place's veterans community in the country. And because of the transition from mayor's office to department, we went from about 4 or 5 people on staff at this time last year to about 20 on staff today, and at the end of the year we'll be 34. So through that transition, we've been given the opportunity to grow pretty aggressively, as well as expand our programming. At the outset, we're built around 3 lines of action. One is housing and support services, so ending veteran homelessness in New York City. One line of action 2 is employment, education, and entrepreneurship, so connecting veterans with jobs and education. And then the third line of action is integrative health and community resilience. So that's thinking about health in a holistic sense, much more broadly than just going to see a doc. We're doing a bunch of other things, but I think that kind of describes what we do. The driving vision. Listen, we are an agency that sits underneath a really, really big federal Department of Veterans Affairs, underneath a pretty big state veterans bureaucracy, and in the middle of tens of thousands of nonprofit veteran-focused organizations. So we have to think pretty strategically and pretty rigorously about what value we can add. I don't think that we've completely figured it out yet. We're less than 100 days old, but the answer probably starts with the fact that when a service member returns home, yeah, they return to a country, yeah, they return to a state, but really, in a physical sense, they return to a community, they return to a city. So the value that we add to the veterans community, we'll be thinking about what are the specific, discrete things that we can do in the actual place where veterans return to ensure that veterans can, return to a purpose-driven, mission-driven life. And I personally do exactly what my job sounds like. I structure public-private partnerships to support all of those lines of action and that overall vision.
What a worthwhile effort, man. It's in just so many different contexts, meet so many different people who do a job that pays well and they derive some fulfillment from, but for the most part that fulfillment piece is lacking. And it seems to me that you found a job where you're really making a positive impact on the world and on a group of people that certainly deserve that. And so I'm just envious of that you found your way into an organization that I imagine gives you like a great degree of personal satisfaction, fulfillment in the work you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, you could, there's nothing better than getting to lead a mission-driven life, and I've been lucky enough and blessed enough to have that opportunity with this job. So, couldn't be more excited, and the fact that I get to do mission-driven work, but also serve the veterans community, which is my tribe, which is our tribe, and do it in what is, in my not so humble opinion, the greatest city on earth, is just the cherry on top of the sundae. So it's I couldn't be luckier.
That's great. And based on your work, knowing that you've got an audience of active duty personnel and veterans listening, what would you want them to know?
About anything in particular? About just life and in general.
Anything that stands out, I think more on the work side of things, but I also think that I imagine in your role, you do encounter a lot of things that are about life or about health or about mental health or any of those fields that aren't work related, but still have an enormous impact on the veteran community. And so, it's a little bit of an open-ended statement, but I guess just more of, anything that stands out for you that you wanted to share.
Yeah, I guess, and I don't, it'll go back to something I said earlier, which is, and this is speaking to the audience of service members who are either contemplating a transition or in the midst of a transition. Be confident in your leadership. Be confident about your experience. Be confident about what you've done. Be honest about what you do and don't know. If you're a squad leader who is transitioning out and going to go back to college and going to be at college for 4 years, if you're going to be there, the way to honor your service and the way to honor where you've come from is not just to be a student. The way to honor where you come from is to be a 4.0 student. And so I guess the thing I'd say is that the serving doesn't release your end of service doesn't release you from responsibility. It gives you responsibility because you've been blessed to have this experience early in life that gives you, a special and because you've been given this experience early in life that allows you to have the skills to actually get things done in the real world. I think that you have a responsibility to take that and do whatever you do next to the fullest extent of your ability, so you can continue to have an impact on the world. So I guess, continue to challenge yourself is what I'd say.
That's really powerful because I'm just putting myself back in the shoes of getting out of the military, and the sense I had, and I imagine a lot of people do, is like I've done my time, I've just gone through a big experience, and I want to relax, I want to take it easy, I want to kind of reap the rewards of that. And I think many aspects of that is true, but what I really like about what you're saying is like, and do the best, man. Like be that 4.0 student. Use what you've done in the past as that launching ground, and be that example, and be at the forefront of whatever you're doing. And I think that's very inspiring.
Yeah, and I do completely agree with you as well, though. Like, drink a couple beers, high five, give yourself a high five too. But yeah, also be the best.
Mm-hmm. And part of what comes up for me when you say that is, what I like in what you're saying is this sense of momentum of like, the image I had when you were talking is like being shot out of a cannon. It's like, look, you are coming from such an incredible background, and use that to like just take the mountain and do your best and push the ball forward and achieve your personal best. And so what comes up for me with that, though, is in talking with a lot of people, there's sometimes this sense that it's going to be easy on the civilian side. And it's almost like a sense of entitlement. Like, I've done my military service and now I'm going to go make a lot of money. And what's come across in a lot of these interviews is that almost everyone has had to like really roll up their sleeves and really bust their ass to get that first job and to prove themselves and to really get ahead. And so the other aspect of what I like about what you said is like, yes, enjoy a couple beers, but like realize you're going to have to hustle. You're going to have to put in a lot of work, and don't expect it all to be easy.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. And I really, I never thought about it. I never thought about service in the context as creating momentum for the rest of your life. But that's, I think that's a really good framing. So I appreciate that.
And you had mentioned the three different aspects that your group does, and the second of those was connecting people with jobs. And I was curious to learn a little bit more about that, of how they help connect veterans with jobs, or any takeaways you've had from that about how people might find their ideal job.
Yeah. So first I'll tackle what we're doing. So again, we're less than 100 days old. So kind of step 1A for us is establishing an on-the-ground presence in each of the city's 5 boroughs. So from the employment perspective, kind of the first thing that we're focusing on is creating physical plant office space in each of the 5 boroughs. So that way we can connect veterans with our workforce initiatives. And 1B is, we live in New York City, pretty large and good and high functioning city government. So part of it is also just ensuring that veterans are getting served by the city's existing workforce initiatives, to make sure we're kind of not duplicating efforts. So that's kind of 1A and 1B. So we're kind of we're prepping the battlefield, as we'd say in the old job. In terms of what veterans can do to get connected with jobs. So the first thing I would say is there's like 1,000,001 nonprofits. Hiring Our Heroes is one that jumps to the top of my mind. Is great.
That was I would say. I'm sorry. That was it. IR Heroes. I'll put a link in the show notes. But it was IR Heroes.
Hiring Our Heroes.
Oh, Hiring Our Heroes. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, and there's not to just endorse one. There's a ton of resources out there for you. So 1A, just don't be afraid to get resources. Another thing, it's more prevalent in the Army than in other services. But starting in I think January 2014, DoD put out a directive to allow separating service members to do a program called Skill Bridge, which allows service members who are less than 180 days away from their separation date to go through an apprenticeship or internship program that is likely to lead to a job. And while you're going through that program, you continue to get paid by DoD. So it's a program that literally allows you to be training for your civilian job while you are still getting paid for being in the uniform. So it's a program that I don't know how many active service members know about. So I'd encourage them again. It's DoD Skill Bridge, SKILLBRIDGE.
Great, and I'll add a link to that in the show notes as well. And I am curious, not to like have you favor certain programs, but I'm wondering where can people getting out find those resources? Is it best just to Google around, or do you know of any good repositories of lists of nonprofits or different things they could look into to see if they might benefit from it?
Yeah, so I'll speak to New York City specifically. So we have what we call a coordinated service network, which is basically a cluster of about 8 different nonprofits across 9 or 10 different service categories that allow a veteran to kind of come in through any entry point, and kind of their case seamlessly gets handed off from one service provider and one type of service provider by another, because all 80 service providers can speak to one another and are actually physically coordinated by a coordination cell whose 9 to 5 day jobs are handing off cases between different service providers, and that network is called NY Serves. So if you just Google NY Serves, you'll go right there.
That's great. And as we're speaking, I'm realizing you're the first person that I've spoken with on the show who I believe the industry would be considered public policy or a subset of government. And I'm wondering, being part of a government organization, in what ways is that similar to your time in the military, but in what ways has it been different from it?
Let's see. I'm wearing a suit and tie right now. My hair's a little bit longer. Those are definitely two things. No, like my work environment right now, unsurprisingly, because of what I do, it's a bunch of veterans. So I guess I'm honestly struggling to find anything other than superficial distinctions. But in terms of camaraderie, in terms of folks being mission driven, we don't have to PT in the morning, and we don't have to have high and tights. But beyond silly stuff like that, the mission and camaraderie aspect is actually pretty similar. at least in our office. And listen, I'm blessed because in addition to serving veterans, we're operating as a startup because we are. So that makes it a little bit more dynamic as well, I think.
That's great. And if someone's listening right now and they're on active duty and they're thinking of transitioning in, let's say, the next year or two, is there any advice you'd give them on how to best prepare for that transition, whether it's financially or figuring out what job to do or in any way, steps they could take right now to get ready for that transition?
Yeah, just be honest with yourself about what you're prepared for and what you aren't. I think I would start with where you want to get. Start with what you want your next step to be. If it's a job, start asking yourself what kind of job and get connected with the resources that can lead you there. If it's school, get connected with, figure out what schools, and get connected with the resources that can help to lead you to school. And I guess the two, in addition to just good mission planning, two things I would encourage folks to do are, number one, plan out as much as possible. College admissions cycles tend to be pretty specific. So you need to be thinking about going to school a year before you go. Same for job openings. Companies, particularly large corporations, plan out their workforces quarters, if not years in advance. The longer you plan ahead, the more prepared you'll be and the likelier you will be to have a smooth transition. That's number one. Number two, aim high. Be honest with yourself, but aim high. Just because you come from a community or maybe you come from a family where going to, an Ivy League school isn't something that other people do doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. I'm not trying to give false promises that everyone in the military should be going to Harvard. That's not realistic, of course. But think about it and be honest with yourself about what's different between you and the 18-year-old that's going there. And I think if more of our transitioning service members were honest with themselves about that conversation, we'd have more service members kind of aiming high. So that'd be my advice.
Yeah, that's powerful. On the first point there, one of the people I've had on the show before, Tim, I'll put a link in the show notes, started a nonprofit called servicetoschool.org. I would encourage anyone who's thinking of attending either college or grad school when they get out. It is 100% free for veterans. They will connect you with someone with a similar background who will coach you through everything you need to know about applying to a college or grad school and finding the right program for you, interviewing, resumes, everything, all for free. So I think I agree with Jay about the prior planning, and that's a great free resource to consider for that. And second, I really like that thought of aiming high. And it has been a surprising aspect of these interviews of realizing how many people felt like I did when I got out. And there was a lot of insecurity for me. Even going to Stanford Business School, just a lot of sense of having to catch up to civilian counterparts and feeling behind and feeling not prepared or not as well qualified. And I really like Jay's advice of just this message of not cockiness, but confidence in your abilities and the skills that anyone has from the military. It is such an unbelievable, unparalleled background. And Jay talked a lot about having to catch up in different functional areas of your job. Those are easy. With the skills that you have from the military, it's going to be easy with hard work to fill in those missing gaps. What's harder is for someone else to get the experience you've had in the military of, being able to perform under pressure, being able to think on your feet. And so really being confident in those abilities and coming out of the military, it's that Nintendo reset button. You are able to chart whatever path you would like, and you may have to work hard to get there, but you can do anything. And so I really appreciate Jay pointing that out, of that aiming high and realizing there's not anything. I don't do double negatives, but you can do anything you want. And I just really am encouraged by you saying that, Jay.
Oh yeah. I mean, no problem. And I do want to double down and say, on the point that you made, which is, yeah, you can do anything you want, but you got to prepare for it.
Yep.
You got to prepare for it. I mean, it won't be handed to you.
Yep. Yeah, it's someone had said a great quote. I can't remember right now, but it's like the amount of effort will be, commensurate with the degree to which what you're going to do is different from what you're doing right now. And so if you're focusing on one functional area in your role right now, it will be easiest to do that near adjacent when you get out. But if you want to do something much different and you're willing to put in that effort to close that gap, definitely go for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Jay, I know we've covered a lot and you've given a tremendous amount of quality advice for people listening. I do like to end with something more open-ended, which is if there was anything I didn't ask about that you'd like to talk about, or any other advice that you haven't already given to the people listening, I'd love to just turn the microphone over to you if there's any other last things you'd like to say.
Yeah, so first I'd just like to thank you, Justin. This was a great opportunity, and thank you for doing this podcast. It's important work. The other thing I'll say is, if you're a veteran, consider New York City, especially if you're a veteran that wants to come here and go to school. If you want to be great at something, you can come to this place and learn how to be great. And I think that a lot of veterans look at that and they go, damn, it's really expensive there. And that's true. But because it's pretty expensive here, the BAH from the GI Bill in New York City is pretty darn good. I think on average it's about $3,700, depending on which school you go to. I'm not trying to, give you a hard sell, but I am saying that, whether you want to stay here or not, New York City is a place where you can come and be excellent at just about anything. So don't let a fear of living in the city be the thing that holds you back from coming here. Accept the challenge of coming to this city, and we're prepared to have you.
I love that. I mean, New York is such a great city. It feels like it should be a requirement for almost everyone to spend some time living in New York. And one thing I love about that image is it is a city where there is everything in such a small area. And especially when I look back on when I got out of the military and had such limited exposure to so much of what is out there, what a great way to just to get out and be immersed in seeing all sorts of different lifestyles, vocations, functional roles, industries, fashion, like every variety possible in every possible area. It would be a great way just to be exposed to a lot and then figure out what you want to do and what you like. So I +1 on the plug for New York, even though I don't live there right now.
Oh, well, too bad for you.
Awesome. Well, Jay, I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me. I'm also just appreciative for the work that you're doing on behalf of veterans to make a difference in their lives. And thanks again for joining me.
Thanks so much, Justin. Take care.
Take care.
Surface.
All right, gang, that's all for today. A couple quick admin items at beyondtheuniform.io. You will find more resources like data, charts, graphs, and a ton of interviews in the podcast section. If you have feedback, if you have ideas on how to make the show better and how to provide more resources to veterans, please drop me a line at beyondtheuniform.io/ping. Lastly, not endorsed by Service to School at all, but it's an organization I've really come to respect based on these interviews. If you are on active duty or if you're a veteran in general and thinking about going to school, that's grad school, undergrad, med school, law school, any type of academic institution, I definitely recommend you check out Service to School. They provide free resources to veterans. They pair you with someone with a similar background who can guide you through the process of everything you need to know to get into the school that's best for you. That's interview prep, resume help, all sorts of things. So check them out at servicetoschool.org. Have a great rest of the week and looking forward to talking to you soon.